Hey there, it's Jess, and for today's project, I'm going to be showing you how this new powerful tool can make crafting fantasy leather armor way easier. This would have taken me several days to do by hand, and this just did it in like 30 minutes. It's wild. So stick around to see the final results, and thank you once again to WeCreat for sponsoring this video. All right, let's get into it. Now, I've already made leather armor on this channel once or twice before. I simply just cannot be stopped. The desire to make custom fancy armor for when I'm running around playing pretend in the woods, it's simply just too strong. But this set is very different than the ones that I have done before, because for the longest time, I have just been itching to do a Druid armor set. You know, armor that looks like it was made directly from nature. I swear I've been collecting inspo and patterns on my Pinterest boards for years now. So imagine my delight when the sponsor of today's video, WeCreat, reached out and was like, hey, if we send you over a fancy 45 watt Vision Pro laser, do you have any cool project ideas that you can use that for? It was simply just a perfect fit. I get to justify taking the time to make my fancy Druid armor, and I get a fancy laser cutter. Jokes aside, this was truly the perfect tool for this project because one of the most difficult parts of this, in order to capture the natural look and textures of natures and plants, you really need to capture that nice organic shape into the leather, which is normally a problem because when you are working with the thick kind of leather that you need to make armor, even just making the most basic cuts can be a giant pain. But with the power of a laser, suddenly, you don't have that limitation anymore. So today I'm going to be walking you through my process of taking pre-made and custom-made patterns and turning it into whimsical looking leather armor using the Vision Pro. So now the concept that I am picturing for my Druid is kind of an autumn battle mage, which I guess is appropriate to the season, even though I do live in Florida where it's still 85 degrees, but you know, we still light our autumn harvest candles and we pretend. So autumn armor it is. So after looking at my inspo, I went ahead and whipped up this quick little sketch of what I kind of want the overall outfit to look like. And today we are just going to be focusing on the leaf gorget, either one of those, matching bracers, as well as a tree bark corset. Now for two of these items, they're going to be pre-made patterns that I found over on Etsy. Because you know, if someone has already made an absolute gorgeous pattern, I'm just going to buy it. But for the bracer, I have my own idea, so that is going to be a custom pattern that I work on later down the process. Now these are patterns set up for leather, but they're not specifically set up for leather laser cutting. There definitely are a lot of great laser cut already prepped and ready patterns available to purchase online. However, it is pretty simple just to take a regular PDF pattern and convert it over to an SVG. Either for me, I use Illustrator, but there's tons of vector programs that you can use out there. Or sometimes you can just edit and delete away the extra layers in like Adobe Acrobat. And obviously we gotta set up the Vision Pro before we can start cutting. And I'm going to be so honest, the most difficult part about setup was just getting it out of the box.
Okay, well.
It is quite a heavy machine, like it's recommended to lift with 2 people. I had to call a friend over to help. But after that, it was pretty much just like plugging stuff in, unscrewing a couple screws, downloading the software, and then it was pretty much good to start cutting. Now, as much as I would love to just drop my patterns into WeCreat and start cutting my leather, it is probably the better idea to do a mock-up beforehand. Which, you know, normally I'm just like, who needs mock-ups? And then I remember how much my roll of leather cost me, and suddenly making some little EVA foam mock-ups doesn't seem so bad. Which in the past, that would mean printing out the template, taping it together, cutting that out, then tracing the shapes over onto the EVA foam, and then cutting out the EVA foam and then being able to assemble it. But you know, since I'm using a laser, I don't have to do any of that. I already have my files prepped and ready for the leather. I just do it on EVA foam first. So instead of adding an extra few hours, it's like an extra 30 minutes. And plus just the added bonus of like, I just very quickly made a cosplay ready gorget.
I think I'm probably going to keep this and maybe make a cosplay around it, if I'm being so honest. Like, could you imagine like a D&D Tinkerbell with this? Oh my god.
Now, at this point, I think I should probably acknowledge the fact that the Vision Pro is not my first and only laser cutter, which is absolutely wild that I technically now have just a spare laser cutter to the side. It makes me feel like that Markiplier clip.
I am a man who owns 5 ovens.
That's me, but with lasers. Like, don't get me wrong, I'll probably find a space to set that one up for like overflow. That being said, the Vision Pro, that's definitely staying in the prime location. Just overall, this is definitely the one that I prefer right now. The other one, that was a 20 watt. This is a 45 watt. That's double the power. Plus, it is built in with beam focus tech, so it kind of feels more like a 60 watt laser instead. Meaning not only do I now have the option to cut through thicker materials, but since there's more power, it means I can up the speed so I can do projects faster while also being able to go in and do the same fine detail. Oh, and then the camera. Oh my gosh, the camera, it's so good. I don't want to go without it now. Especially to the fact that I keep basically all my leather scraps waiting for the perfect moment for it. Like before, if I wanted to try and use any of those scraps, I would have to like mark out all the edges by hand. Now I just throw it onto the bed and it takes a picture. And I just place the designs or cuts onto the scrap. It's just that easy. The adjustable height on the Vision Pro also gives me way more range and being able to put like taller vertical objects. And the Vision Pro has so many accessories available. But the thing that they sent me that is truly magical is this air purifier. Like when I first saw that it wanted me to put like the air exhaust into the purifier instead of like venting it out the window, I was like, I don't think that's actually going to work. I think I'm still going to get so much fumes in this room. And then when I was doing my testing, I realized I couldn't smell a single gosh darn thing.
The fact that this, on the lowest setting by the way, is enough to get all the fumes? What?
And I was burning leather, which is notoriously very stinky when you burn it.
Literally, one of the entire setups about this room was based on the fact that my laser cutter had to be close to the window so I could vent it. But now I don't need that.
Truly magical. Okay, now that the mock-up is done, it's time to now cut into the good stuff, the fancy leather. I am going to be using an 8 to 9 ounce veggie tan leather. Now I do have to do some cutting by hand just so I can get pieces small enough to fit into the working area, and you can see how much I am struggling just cutting in a straight line. Could you imagine me trying to cut all these little leaf curves while I'm struggling just to do this? Once I had my leather cut down to size, all I had to do was place it in the cutter, refresh the image and place my designs, and make sure my design is the correct settings for either line engravement or cutting. They do have a ton of preset materials, but specifically for this one, I always like to test and make my own settings. And then with the press of a button, I just gotta wait for the laser to do its work. Unfortunately, with the first 2 pieces I did, apparently the leather that I tested versus the one from the new roll was like way denser for some reason. So it cut most the way through, but I still had to go in with an X-Acto knife and kind of like just cut away the last layer, which you know is a little bit annoying that I had to go back and do. But you know what the cool thing was? Is in the time that it took me to go back and do that, I was able to adjust my settings and run the rest of the cuts and have the rest of my armor ready by the time that it took me to just do that little trimming. That feeling must be what it feels like to be able to multitask. And since I already have my other pattern ready, the process is pretty much exactly the same for the corset as well. One thing that you do have to be careful with when you are using a laser on leather is that you are going to get little burn and soot marks on the leather. So I do have to take a little bit of an extra step to clean that off, but luckily it's really easy just with a little bit of soapy water and a toothbrush. Just a little bit of brushing and most of it disappears right away. And since at this point the leather is already damp, I decided to just damp the whole thing and take my swivel knife and start engraving the design. Even though I really don't know all that much about leather carving, if I'm being honest, I took one beginner class at Tandy Leather like over a year ago and only remember how to really use the swivel knife and bevel tool, and that is pretty much it. But you know, it's enough to be semi-impressive on the internet, hopefully. And while technically I could just leave the line engraving there and still have my design on there, and yes, it does take a little bit of extra time to do this by hand, but just adding the carving and the little bit of beveling adds so much dimension to the piece. It also adds like a little bit of a handmade touch to it. Okay, now that those are all clean, beveled, and carved, it's time to start making my custom pattern. And for this, I used the ancient techniques and ways of all those cosplayers that come before me of cling wrap and duct tape. Pretty simple method. Wraps my arm in cling wrap, wrap that around in duct tape, drew my pattern on with a Sharpie. Then once I freed myself, I could then cut out my custom pattern. Now for the bracer, instead of having the entire thing be a leaf, I decided to go ahead and layer it up where the bottom pointed part would extend and you would still get that pretty fall coloring. Then it would be a more standard pointed bracer on top of that with some gold design on it. But instead of just having a leaf attached at the top and the bottom, I decided to just separate it into two different pieces because I kind of like the idea of having a separate leaf sleeve that I would maybe want to wear sometimes. So I traced the entire pattern at first to get the size of the leaf sleeve, and then I cut it again just to get that of the bracer. I'd then take those patterns and trace it onto some paper and some EVA foam just to test and make sure that it still fits correctly. And from there, I then scan the design and bring it into Illustrator. Here I am just cleaning it up, making it all even, and then also coming up with a pretty simple leaf design to have on top of it as well that is going to be engraved into the bracer. I then exported it as a SVG and was able to bring it directly into the WeCreat program. From there, I just set what I want cut, what I want engraved, what I want line filled, and from there it is a very similar process again. For the leaf sleeve, since I was going to go ahead and cut it out of a pretty thin goatskin leather anyway, I didn't really bother trying to go and cut it in the laser cutter because it's really simple just to cut by scissors. But I did still want it to have some line engravings, so I did go ahead and put it on the bed and trace it out with the pen tool in the WeCreat program, and then drew on some random leaf lines and veins to give it more of that leaf look that I could just quickly engrave on there. I will say, a critique I have of the WeCreat program is that every time I click into the pen tool, it always gives me the tips over and over and over again, which I'm so glad that it wants me to know the shortcuts, but like maybe I could chill a little bit. That is my one critique. And with those last two pieces, we now have all the leather in our project cut and ready to go, which I think I was able to get all this done over the course of like, I don't know, 2 days, which while it still takes like a little bit of time to prepping the files, making the custom design, cleaning, beveling, carving. If I was doing this by hand, I'm pretty sure just cutting out like the corset alone would have just taken that time. But you know, now I have time to do the fun stuff like dyeing the leather, dyeing the leather color, which is where a lot of the life of this project is going to come from. Which I'm pretty sure I've joked before that the reason that I decided to invest in a laser cutter in the first place was the fact that it took me forever to cut out all those little dragon scales for the leather chest plate that I did. But truly, the amount of time that you save on doing the tedious stuff gives you so much more time to do like the fun stuff that really let you get creative and not just sit there tracing out templates over and over and over again and then having cut the same shape over and over and over again. I mean, for the corset and the bracers, it was pretty straightforward. I just had a nice dark brown, and to help bring out the engravings a little bit more, I added an antique mahogany finish to make those a little bit darker. Now I have tried to dye like leather autumn leaves before in a previous project. However, with that one, I did have an issue of the yellow turning out more brown, and then also the red being super overpowering. And when I was testing out the different leather dyes that I had, I came across a copper one that I think I got on clearance at one point. And at first I thought it was just like copper orange, but then when I actually tried it, it was very much metallic. I realized when I put the yellow color over it, it made that really bright color. I also noticed that the dye didn't like immediately soak into the leather because it had that metallic coating now, which meant when I added a little bit of red to it, it gave me more time to mix it and make a more of a nice gradient instead of like a really blotchy red. It was very unexpected because I really didn't think I would like a metallic leaf look, but it actually turned out really, really well. I was a little concerned that the dye might run off because it's not like fully being able to absorb into the leather, but after sealing and some buffing, it still stayed intact. So I did that to the rest of the pieces and was able to go in and really give it a nice mix of color. And then to add even more depth, I took a darker red and went into like all the little carvings to really make everything else pop. And it turned out so good.
But it also makes it so infuriating that I spent so long on it, because ultimately this is just going to go on the back of my neck and probably be like covered by my hair most of the time.
And then to finish off the bracer, I took a little bit of gold leather paint and filled in all the gold spaces of what I wanted my design to be, which I was surprised how much I like this bracer. I know I went pretty simple with the design, like literally just a leaf and some swirls. But I think just being able to get the design so clean because I was able to follow along with the lines of the engraving just did so much, where it's like I absolutely just love how it looks. And now that everything was a nice autumn color, it was time to start assembling with some sewing. Now, normally I dread the idea of having to sew really thick pieces of leather together, but I realize that is mostly due to the fact that you have to hand mark and then punch out all the individual holes. But again, the beauty of using a laser cutter, all that work was already done for me. I had all my sewing holes perfectly punched and spaced out and ready to go. So basically the only thing that I had to continuously worry about was forgetting what pattern I was doing midway through, which did admittedly happen a lot. But other than that, it was smooth sailing. But add that to the checkbox of things that are just made easier because laser. And funny enough, with all these pieces, nothing really had any hardware to add. All I had to do was just place in my eyelets, lace everything up, and just like that, the first few pieces of my Druid costume were ready to go. Overall, I think that these pieces are so adorable. I'm so happy with how the color came out on the leaves. Even if a lot of the work I did is on the back of the neck that I can't see most of the time, I still know it's there. There's some minor adjustments that I think I still want to add to the pre-made pattern pieces. I will kind of admit the leaf sleeve did not come out as I thought it would. The metallic color on the more flexible leather kind of looks a little bit more like cheap costume fabric than this nice leather. But overall, I think that this is a fantastic start to the little Druid character that I want to become. All right, and for a few final thoughts on how the project went using the Vision Pro, there's definitely a lot of features that I enjoyed, but specifically the camera and the autofocusing helped so much with workflow. Having the more powerful laser, especially with the beam focus technology, allowed me to do all the cuts on this thicker material a lot faster without sacrificing any quality. I also love that you get a nice compact machine with still a really big work area. I live in like a 1-bedroom apartment and don't have the biggest craft room, so this size is absolutely perfect for my setup. If you are a crafter, this is definitely a very powerful tool to have because it can just do such a variety of things, whether it is leather, wood, or EVA foam, so it is definitely a worthwhile investment. I definitely would recommend checking out WeCreat. Even if it is not the Vision Pro, they also have a wide variety of laser cutters for different levels. So if you are interested, I have an affiliate link below where I will also get a little bit of kickback and you can help support the channel and the stuff that I do as well. And you get cool tools. It's win-win. Thank you once again to WeCreat for sending me this lovely machine and also helping support the channel. As always, I hope that you enjoyed the video and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye!